Get pucked.
Well, like I mentioned, I mean, and most people, obviously, by the time they listen to this, know the season's over. Give me one word to summarize the season.
It's I'm going to use the word progress. It's ironic because if you look at them in the standings right now, especially we don't know if they're going to draft right now for the lottery draft five or six, yeah. Right? So if they end up at fifth, it's the same place as they were last year. However, a lot of players have progressed. A lot of players have produced that didn't last year. Montreal leads the league in overtime losses. Just half of those put them, half of them could have gone either way and would have put them in a playoff position, so to speak, or at least fighting for a playoff spot. Yeah. They're the team that lost, I think, the most one-goal games in the entire NHL this year.
Yeah, I think so.
So when you're looking at it that way, last year there was entertaining hockey, but there was many more games that were just dreadful to watch. It was like a big mix of everything. This season, there was a lot more entertaining hockey being played. You saw the growth of a lot of our star players, or our future star players, or at least the players that the teams have invested quite a bit into. And you're seeing there's a lot to be excited for next year. So I'm going to say progress for this year.
Progress for this year. That's pretty good. That's not bad.
What about you?
I think I want to say takeoff. That's what I want to say. Take off in a sense that
that's not really one word, but go on.
Well, take off. Okay, I put a hyphen there. I'm saying it in such a way like I feel that this was a pivotal year for a lot of the young core that took that next step. They're taking off now. They're going on to the next level of what they're capable of doing. I think the organization is taking off now to the next level of what the rebuild is. I don't necessarily know if that means playoffs. I don't. But I definitely think, put it down now, April, whatever we are, 17th. Make sure you note that I'm saying next season, when the Canadiens finish that season, they will have more points than 76 points.
What I also like when you think of it is that last year when we were looking at it, we had some question marks. Oh, what's going to happen with the goalies? Is Nick Suzuki the number one center? Who are going to?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
It's starting to clear up. The water is not as murky as it was before.
Exactly.
You know that Sam Montembeault is our number one goalie. The question mark is going to be: is Primo going to stay there? Fowler's eventually going to come to Laval. Like, are they going to go and get a
couple years?
But just to say, like the goaltending position is not as murky. Defense, there's question marks, but it's not so much as to who are they gonna trade as a veteran, who's gonna be the number one defenseman. It's okay. They have a lot of young defensemen. They can't keep them all. Who are they gonna use to leverage to go get something to address another need? Nick Suzuki is the number one center on the Montreal Canadiens roster. Barring any oh my god, big splash that dethrones him from that spot, he's the number one guy. You seem to have your number one line cemented now. Before we didn't have a number one line.
Well,
it's like who's putting on the right,
funny.
Who's on the left.
Yeah, but hold on. It's funny you say that because unfortunately he's not here, but I think he won't mind if I mention it on his behalf. If you were to ask somebody like Dave, for example, do you have a number one line? He'd give you one of his Dave faces and say, do you? Do you? Like some people are not 100% convinced that first line that was out there for the majority of this season with Slafkovsky and Suzuki and Caulfield are a number one line. And Dave, if you're listening, you feel free. You can comment yourself if you like, if you have changed your thoughts about this or if I misspeak on your behalf. But I'm in agreement with you. I think for the most part, you've answered a lot of questions. There are obviously many more questions to answer, but a bunch of the things that were standing out at the beginning of the season, you now have a much more concise view of it. That 3 goalie rotation is gone and hopefully will never happen again. You're rocking Monty, you're rocking Primo. They were both very serviceable. Are either of them?
He can play in the NHL.
Primo is an NHL backup.
Is he a goaltender that could be a 1A, 1B type of scenario? Remains to be seen.
He's still growing.
He does have the best goals. He did have the best goals against average on the Montreal Canadiens roster, the best save percentage of the Montreal Canadiens roster.
He also played the least.
But he played the least, right? So next year, with having a bit more of a bigger workload, will he be able to maintain that and sustain what he was doing by the end of the season?
I mean,
time will tell. But that's the type of question marks we're asking. Before it was like, okay, Who's going to get put on waivers? Who's going to get traded? It
Well,
was
that's
always,
it, right? So
like I said,
that's
the water's
changed.
not as
Yeah.
murky anymore.
That's it. So you got those guys there, and again, right? They're serviceable. Can either of them, Primo being much younger, can they find next season and take it to another level and really start to show as a legitimate option as a starter? You hope so. But at the very least, you're going to have two guys that are going to play a lot more games, and they're going to be a lot more consistent in their schedule, which I think is going to help them overall. That's good. Suzuki, huge season. I know you got other teams that are looking, saying
77
your
points,
top guy only had 77 points. Okay, fair. But bear in mind, this is a big leap from where he was last year. Bear in mind, if you will, that the Montreal Canadiens of this season had one line. With all the other injuries and all the other things that have happened, they had to do the brunt of the work night in, night out. You had other teams who wanted to shut down the Canadiens. They needed to shut down that one line. Suzuki had to play a lot of defensive roles as well. Excuse me.
He posted
was everywhere.
points playing against the best, playing against the toughest matchups.
That's what I'm getting at. So my point is, imagine next year, if you will, for a second, just hypothetically, just spitballing here. You keep the same first line. Now suddenly you have a second line, which Newhook was a revelation once he came back. He was playing some really good hockey. And people are making the comparison to what Doc was doing towards the tail end of last season too, with the hopefulness of the upcoming season to come. You have Doc, you have Newhook, and for the sake of argument, let's put Josh Hua on that line too. Let's say all three of those guys go to where we're hoping they're going to be. Not even max potential, but like they take that next step. Enough that they need to keep the other teams honest about them. You can't ignore them. Suddenly, what do you think is going to happen to that first line? They're going to draw more opportunities against the weaker defensive pairings and against the weaker lines. Not all the time, but more often. That is ultimately going to lead to more goals. So is it feasible for Suzuki to all of a sudden be an 85-point player next year?
Well,
Absolutely.
he's always had point per game potential, but you see, like, is he at the levels of the McDavids of the world? Absolutely not. But at the same time, there are number one centers across the league that are posting up similar numbers or have posted similar numbers, give or take 5-10 points here and there. Not 10 points, but 5 points. Rupi Heinz is a perfect example. Rupi Heinz has been a perennial. He's been a 70-point center, 37 goals until this year. Okay, this year's at 65 points in 79 games, 30 goals. He's considered a number one center. Nico Hischier, considered a number one center. You could argue it should be Jack Hughes and the coaching or whatever. Should be, right? But I mean, you have guys that are number one centers that are 75 plus point players. The thing is that he scored 33 goals. That is huge. For a team that was lacking goal scoring, they got 33 goals while playing the toughest matchups. There has been definitely an uptick in Suzuki's game. He's brought his game to another level. I do think that Suzuki can be a point per game player. I think he'll plateau at around that 85-ish points. That's my theory. That's my opinion. I don't see him as being a guy who's going to break 100 or even could he have a crazy season when the whole team's gelling together and be in the low 90s? Possibly. But for now, let's be happy with the 77 points. Let's be happy that Caulfield, while he didn't score the goals that people were projecting him to score at the beginning of the season, he had a career year in terms of his stats. He also, you know what I mean, his points per game. Slafkovsky hit 50 points and 20 goals in his second year in the NHL. Newhook also hit new highs there too, while missing a good chunk of the season. There's a lot to
take off. They're taking off, baby.
They're taking off, and I do expect that next year they will take their season and their game to another level. Next year, add Kirby Dach. Hopefully, he doesn't get hurt, and he's healthy to play. And then add whatever talent that they may add in the offseason and the changes that they do. I'm excited to see the Montreal Canadiens next year. I'm excited to see the Montreal Canadiens for the next few years because the future is bright, and it's very bright.
Get pucked.